thank you very much indeed. That was indeed a fantastic session. For those who don't know me, I'm Iain McInnes. I work here in Glasgow. I'm one of the Vice Principal Head of College of Medical Veterinary and Life Sciences. Another life, I'm an immune disease doctor. Alison sends her sincere apologies. I think the thought of co-chairing with me was simply too much for her. But paracetamol, we hope, is going to settle the whole thing down. Alison couldn't be with us, but sends her very, very best wishes. We've heard a great deal about how extraordinarily wonderful the country of Scotland is and the work that CSO has pioneered now for 50 years, changing lives here in Scotland, but changing lives globally, part of the Scottish diaspora of people and knowledge and impact. It's really a cause for great celebration. But every great nation should look overseas and listen carefully and learn. And many of us are given the gift of travel in our professional lives. Today we are extraordinarily privileged to have two truly global leaders join us, and we're very grateful to you. First of all, I know Anna would like me to thank you for the work that you do as part of the Strategic Advisory Group to CSO. And now we will all be beneficiaries of your thoughts and advice. So I will not go through the CVs. It would occupy many hours of our time, wonderful reads though they are. Please do use the QR code if you're able, and if you're not, you can read it later on online. So, first of all, to Professor TAN Chorh Chuan, you are very welcome visiting from Singapore, a luminary in every area, and a very interesting parallel to be drawn between the science, the health, and the technology interactions that have taken place in Singapore. Thank you for your anticipated remarks.
Thank you very much, and I want to first express my heartiest congratulations to the CSO for 50 years of superb leadership and contribution, and to say how honored I am to be able to speak at this conference and to hear the very impressive work that's been presented this morning. Well, Singapore has the same population as Scotland, 5.5 million, but it's a fairly big city on a very tiny island. The highest point in Singapore is 166 meters, which of course pales with Ben Nevis. But I just wanted to share some of the things that we've been working on in building the science, biomedical sciences research system in Singapore, and how we've been trying to connect it with our health transformation agenda. Singapore started investing in the life sciences in the year 2000, and I would characterize our development as being driven by 5 big moves. The first was in the year 2000 when the Agency for Science, Technology and Research was set up to build the basic science foundations for the life sciences, and a new biosciences hub complex was developed in Biopolis. Then around the same time, there was a very fundamental transformation of our 2 major universities, the National University of Singapore and the Nanyang Technological University. And also, somewhat later, 2 academic health systems were set up, and these together laid the basic science foundations for the work to follow. Then, sometime in the 2010s, we focused a great deal on strengthening the innovation part of the equation to strengthen the translational and commercialization ecosystem. And so quite a number of initiatives were embarked upon to build translational enablers that assisted with rapid productization and development of diagnostics, therapeutics. We engaged a lot of venture capital and tried to build a pool of entrepreneurial talent. Over the last 20 years, I think we have made progress in building the science base, and also in realizing some of the economic benefits of these efforts. And I just show a snapshot here of a few numbers to indicate what has been developed over the last 20 years. If you look at biomedical manufacturing, it grew about 5-fold over the last 20 years. In the last 5 to 8 years, we've seen quite a nice and promising tick-up in the numbers of digital health, medtech, and biotech startups. And in the 2 years, 2021 and 2022, they raised about $2 billion in venture capital. So in this last 5 years, we have put a particular focus on trying to drive value creation, even as we continue to build on the science base and on the translational ecosystem. And we think about value creation from life sciences as realizing health value and also economic value. And there is a big overlap between the two. But this morning, in the interest of time, I'll just say a few words about how we are thinking about developing the health value creation from our biosciences foundations. Like Scotland, I think we are very much focused on developing population health, preventative health. We have a major health transformation initiative ongoing called Healthier SG, SG for Singapore. We are working very hard on healthy longevity to increase our health-adjusted life expectancy. And like everybody else, we are working on value-based care outcomes, particularly in hospitals, to try to dampen the rate of increase in health expenditures. So one of the things that we think quite a lot about is how to make use of the research base that we have in order to contribute to these goals. So I'll just mention a few of these. They don't form the totality of all the things that we do, but I thought might be useful for the discussion this morning. So the three things that we are thinking about in terms of how we can more directly support the healthcare transformation priorities are firstly how to make population health approaches even more effective. How do we implement precision public health at scale? And within hospitals particularly for value-based outcomes, how do we implement precision medicine? And on the first topic, which is how to make population health approaches more effective, some of you may be familiar with this health impact pyramid from the US CDC, which essentially many of us think about population health as engaging individuals, education, trying to help people to reshape their behaviors and sustain them as healthier ones. But what this health pyramid indicates to us is that this, of course, is important, but it's very difficult because we have to work with individuals and the population impact would necessarily be more limited. But if we went all the way down to the base of the pyramid, if we were able to change the environment in which people lived, worked, and played, the built environment, the food environment, the community in which they lived, then we could make healthier choices a default for the majority so that you don't need to constantly make conscious choices in order to be healthier. So in other words, if we try to think about the research question of how could we have interventions at the base of the pyramid that could improve the default environment and make require less individual effort and have the greatest population impact. So for example, we could apply artificial intelligence to see what would make a neighborhood more walkable and whether the interventions that we implement succeed in helping people to walk more, and whether over time this then results in healthier populations. Of course, we can't just work at the base of the pyramid, but if we work at the base of the pyramid and combine it with actions at the individual level, then I think we could have a much more synergistic and reinforcing set of interventions. So at the top of the pyramid, we are all, of course, very much thinking about how we can more effectively help individuals adopt and to sustain healthier behaviors. And in Singapore, we have a health promotion board, which over the last 20 years has developed many national scale health promoting events. So one example of this is our National Steps Challenge, which has engaged nearly 2 million people so far over the last 10 years. Participants are given a tracker. You receive rewards, nudges, monetary vouchers that you can use in the supermarket, etc. If you achieve a certain number of increase in your step count. And what these data show, I mean, the bottom line is that in the short term, you can actually increase the amount of physical activity in the participants. But as you see in the red line at the bottom, the real challenge is it's very hard to sustain. And even though we were able to have participants increase their step count by nearly 1,500 steps during the period of intense engagement and rewards, you will see that after about 2 months, nearly 2/3 of them no longer were using their step trackers. I don't know where they are now, probably lying around in assorted drawers. So one of the areas that we've been working on between the Health Promotion Board and Apple is to see whether making use of data from wearables in consented patients, but using artificial intelligence in real time to understand how people's behaviors are shifting and to provide tailored messages and nudges in order to sustain participation and involvement. So this collaboration has gone on for 2020, since 2020. The data are not published yet, but the preliminary things that we've seen look quite promising. And so if we are able to combine the changes to the environment with ways in which we can work with individuals to sustain healthy behaviors, then I think we have opportunities to improve population health at scale. Now, if we move on to the next topic, which is how can we implement precision public health at scale, we think that 3 really critical things have to be in place in order to be able to do so. The first is the enabling data foundations, which we heard about a lot this morning. The second, which is something Scotland is also a leader in, is how to pilot, to validate, and to evaluate projects much more quickly, much more efficiently, and to be able to scale them faster. I think this is a real challenge in most health systems, including in Singapore, and the ability to scale is actually the greatest bottleneck that we see in innovation and the ability to realize the full benefits of science innovations. And finally, of course, you need effective national delivery systems upon which precision health, public health measures can leverage. So we have in Singapore learned a lot thanks to John Saville, Andrew Morris and others from Silk, from HDR UK. And we have, being inspired by your example, established a similar data exchange in Singapore called Trust, which enables us to make use of data held by the health system, health records now extending to housing data, educational data, social and behavioral data. And on the research side, we've been working with cohorts which we think have enduring value, working pre-agreements between cohort owners so that their research data can be more readily merged with other research data and with public health data in order to be analyzed by researchers and in time to come by companies. So that's the data piece where we are now in the process of scaling. We have also worked quite hard on trying to develop approaches and platforms by which we can pilot, validate, and scale innovations more efficiently and faster. I don't have time to talk about this, but would be happy to talk about this over tea time if there's interest to do so. And finally, the effective national delivery systems. In Singapore, as part of this Healthy SG transformation effort, we are looking at how we can drive population health and prevention, and in particular, to control chronic diseases well. And we see this as being held up by 3 pillars and 2 horizontal foundations. And the pillar that we are working on right now, particularly, is a primary care pillar, where we are trying to convert our fairly fragmented, largely private GP system into one which is much more integrated into the public healthcare delivery system. And the key to that is GP enablement, taking many steps to help busy GPs be able to deliver team care at scale. We are starting to enroll residents above the age of 40 to primary care practitioners. And crucially, we are changing the funding model so that we hope we can work with the GPs to change the clinical and business model to one that is largely focused now more on transactional care, to a care model that emphasizes prevention and population health. So just ending up with 2 quick examples to give you a flavor of some of the things that we're working on. We have, under the National Precision Medicine Program, which is a research program funded about 6 years ago in Singapore, Asia's largest multi-ethnic Asian whole genome sequence cohort, which is also deeply phenotyped, with consent for linkages to health and other records and for recontact. And we've requested the Precision Medicine Program to particularly run a number of use case applications that address our population health priorities as well as value-based outcomes. And one of the pilots that is currently ongoing is focused on familial hypercholesterolemia. And the goal is to identify the proband much more efficiently at the primary care level, to do cascade screening within the family, and to intervene early with the goal of reducing the risk of premature heart attacks in this at-risk population. So this is a program that we think, if successful, would lay the foundations for similar public health, precision public health interventions in the future. The second example is quite a different one, which is exploring the possibilities of implementing digital health at scale. So the Office of Healthcare Transformation, which I founded about 5 years ago, worked with our Institute of Mental Health in Singapore, which looks after the majority of patients with severe mental illness in Singapore. And essentially, the problem we're trying to address in a cohort of 100 patients with schizophrenia is that there are no objective markers of when these patients who are on treatment will deteriorate. And so the case managers have no idea, if they don't hear from a patient, whether that is good news or it's actually bad news. And what the Office of Healthcare Transformation did was to develop a digital phenotyping platform that analyzes 7 digital signals from patients through wearables and handphones with the patient's consent, and using AI to analyze these signals and correlate them with relapses or deterioration. And what they were able to do is to predict for the care team which patients are more likely to relapse, and to present this to the care team in the form of a dashboard. And the care team can then prioritize the patients who are more likely to relapse. So this paper is being written up. It's not published yet, but the clinicians like it a lot, and therefore this is now being adopted as a service in our Institute of Mental Health, and we are assisting with this rollout. And at the same time, we are taking the same platform and applying it to mild mental illness as well as to other conditions beyond mental health. So I want to thank you once again for this opportunity to share some of the things we are doing in Singapore. Essentially, we have, over the last 20 years, adopted 5 moves that we consider to be big ones to develop the Biomedical Sciences Research Innovation System. We are working quite hard to maximize both the economic and health value creation from our biomedical sciences research foundations, and putting in place the foundation enablers required for us to do this at scale. So thanks very much indeed, and I look forward to your comments and questions.
That was fantastic. You know, I've got this mental picture. I'm going to give Chorh Chuan a country and tell them to organise it. And about 10 minutes later, there'll be a plan. And a week later, amazing things will be happening. So thank you for your clarity and for that, if you like, the roadmap, which read backwards looks perfect. So I guess my first question is a typical Scottish thing, isn't it? Glass half empty, half full. Did you try things that didn't work? And while you're giving us an answer to that, I would encourage people to wave an arm, and one of our wonderful microphone bearers will rush towards you. Carefully up the stairs, please. But did you do things that felt obvious but actually were unsuccessful?
Yes, we have had our fair share, more than our fair share of things that didn't work. I would remember that we tried to develop a national tissue bank. The sort of idea was everyone put your tissue into a bank, it will be made available, everyone will benefit from it. And after a couple of years of negotiation, people said, yes, we will support this. But then we found that they were putting in a small amount of tissue, refused to share the data, and therefore the tissue were of very limited value. So I had the terrible experience of starting a tissue bank, and 10 years later, I had to be the one to close it down. So we had many experiences like this. But what I learned from that really is the importance of working really hard on the leadership and getting people to really come behind a vision, and occasionally, gently, using funding and other levers to help bring them together. So one quick example of this is when we wanted to bring our 2 national specialist cancer centers together with the research centers in the university and in A-STAR. We gave them 3 years of core funding to build 4 platforms together: a data platform, a tissue platform, bring our clinical trials together, and work on a number of use cases together. And the condition for long-term continued funding was to be able to pass an external review at the end of year 3 to demonstrate that you have genuinely been able to build these platforms together. And I would say the change, generational change in leadership, persuading people to come on board, and then applying funding measures, I think they passed their test, so they got their next 5 years of funding, but it took a great deal of effort to orchestrate.
And interesting that you integrate use cases all the way through so that there are examples of progress. So we do have a couple of questions. We have Hing and then Damana, and I think C. Colin there as well, so great stuff. So we'll take 3 sharp questions and astute answers, sir. Hing.
Shall I just start shouting?
Why don't you shout, Hing?
Yeah,
nothing new.
Thank you very much. It's really great to see that amazing collection of work you've done. I'm quite interested to know about your experience in interaction with venture capital, and if you could maybe share some advice and your experience in your interaction with venture capital in terms of protecting your biomedical research community and the health system, but maximizing the opportunity to work with venture capitalists.
Yeah, great question. And I would say first, we had to overcome the chicken and egg problem, because venture capital won't come unless you have a pipeline. And if you don't have venture capital, you can't have a pipeline. So the government had to step in with a lot of seed funding, early growth funding, to build a robust pipeline. The universities had to step up. We had to do a lot of engagement to have more entrepreneurial staff. Then when we had a pipeline, we were then able to work with venture capital, quite often through a public-private fund of funds approach. And if you look at the situation now, I think the most amount of venture capital has gone to digital health, where we have a couple of unicorns. Then medtech has, we think, reached a reasonable state. But biotech is the one, therapeutic biotech is still very difficult. And the particular rate the bottleneck that we face in Singapore now is it's growth phase funding. And so now we are working with global VCs to see whether we can come together and address the growth phase funding that is required for companies to grow Series B and so on.
Okay, thank you very, very much. This is fantastic. I have two very quick questions. One is on schizophrenia. You told us that great way to use data to predict deterioration. Mental health, huge problem all over the world. But then you said psychiatrists liked it, so we adopted it before it was published. Explain what made you adopt it so quickly and what the regulators said about all this.
Yeah, thanks. So the data were available. So the psychiatrists, the clinical people had full sight of the data. It's just that the manuscript has not been accepted yet. And they found that the data, in their view, was compelling. And they also found it was very useful for their clinical practice. And it was actually better than what they have now, which is to continually call people and say, how are you doing? And not really knowing whether someone is deteriorating or improving. And so they felt as a group that they were prepared to go. Within Singapore, if you develop an AI solution and you just use it in one institution in which it was developed, you don't need to get it licensed or approved by the regulator. But the minute you try to take it out from that originating institution, then you have to, and that is the next phase that we will have to do, which is then to take it to the device regulators to get it approved.
Great, very quick one. In your journey from 2000 till now, data, it comes all the time. What was the most important positive thing that you've done about health data that helped you on your journey?
I think the most important thing was to get the permissibility to use the most of the data health records, which effectively are held by the government. And because it's held by the government, there are a lot of concerns about its usage. And the most critical thing we did was to systematically work with the government to understand the concerns and to understand under what conditions, with what type of de-identification, how we separate out, segment out data, under what conditions would they be comfortable to allow data to be used in a particular way. And after we worked on this for about 2 years, and we were able to reach a satisfactory solution. And the Data Access Committee is actually chaired by a very senior person from the Ministry of Health, so that assurances can be maintained that data will be properly used. I would say that we are also very keen to work with the providers and the government to demonstrate the value of the data, because the value of the data to the public is something that would sustain support for its continued use, and therefore we have been very prudent and moving relatively slower in working with industry, because we really wanted the public to first hear of the benefits that have come from using data for the public, largely by public researchers, before we start to engage industry in a very significant way.
And Colin, just briefly. Hi there, Colin Palmer from the University of Dundee.
Hi, yeah, so you've got 100,000 people with whole genome sequences. One of the most commonly reported pieces of information from a individual's genome is their drug metabolism status. And that can be used to guide the treatment for about 150 different commonly used drugs. Are you looking at how you're going to use that information and be able to use that clinically?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. And so I also add a footnote to this, that this is Asian genomes, because as you know, Asian populations are very significantly underrepresented in the international whole genome sequence data. And therefore, we think this is an important contribution to ensure that the data are much more representative of the world's population. And within that, we have linkages to phenotypes, etc., including drug interactions and metabolism. And in fact, one of the use cases that the cancer folks are working on is using pharmacogenomics to identify people at high risk of idiosyncratic drug interactions, and applying that in order to preemptively prevent these kinds of severe drug interactions. So the data are being used for pharmacogenomic and drug interaction studies, but our role really is to ensure that there is a data platform which researchers with good ideas and use cases can access, and these also include drug use. And in fact, one of the things we've asked is whether you can apply precision medicine in order to reduce the cost of treatment, particularly for expensive treatments. And we have a couple of examples where dosing regimes can be reduced, or people who are more likely to respond can be identified. And these, of course, result in cost savings for the health system.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So that was fabulous. And from one fabulous to more fabulous, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Victor Dzau to the podium, who is, again, his CV is stellar. It is available to you through QR codes and online. Currently the chair, the president of the US National Academy of Medicine. Victor, we look forward to your pearls. To you, sir.
Thank you, Ian, and good morning to all of you. Good morning. All right, that's good. There is some coffee out there in case you need them. Well, what a pleasure to congratulate you on your 50th. It's wonderful to see leadership of Scotland Health, Carolyn, and of course Ian, Andrew, and David, and of course Anna. Well, you know, it's interesting to follow Chorh Chuan because he's also one of my favorite people, and he's managed to get me to work for him, as Anna has managed to do the same. The good news, of course, is, you know, I'm an honorary citizen of Singapore, and Anna, honorary degree from University of Glasgow. So, thank you. Yeah. So I was assigned this topic, future medicine. I said, I don't have a crystal ball. If I do, I'll be doing something else. But I'll give it a try, because I do think the topic of innovation and how research innovation fits this whole landscape. It's said to be an international perspective. I'll say it's my perspective. Hopefully you see kind of similar to what I see in terms of where things are going. So with that background, oops, that's not my slide. There you go. I change it to future medicine and innovation, and really think about what kind of ecosystem do we want to develop in order to actually improve health and improve our society. So when I think about this, I think we should all be very grateful and proud of the fact that innovations made a huge difference to human beings, their health, well-being, and all of society. This first slide shows you life expectancy. In the last century, we doubled the life expectancy. And so you can see that much of it is related to the fact that we use science innovation to advance, in fact, health, medicine, and society. What you see here, of course, is hygiene, sanitation, improved nutrition, vaccination, tobacco control, global road safety, diagnosis, therapies, and you name it. So there's a lot to be excited about for the past century. And actually going forward, if you look back, we now have therapies on almost every single disease. What's amazing is The fact we have advances in cell therapy in cancer, cancer immunotherapy, and heart disease. When I first started my training back in the 70s and my practice in the 80s, in heart failure we had 2 drugs, digitalis and diuretics. And I'm not even sure digitalis really works. But now you can see how far we've come with regards to diabetes. The sodium glucose transporter inhibitors, as well as semaglutide, the GLP-1 agonist. Phenomenal drugs that's come through. And I can go through this entire list with regards to drugs and devices and transplantation, and of course, so many of the other things. We've also been helped by 2 revolutions. A biomedical science revolution started with the discovery of DNA helix, Watson Crick, to the sequence of the entire genome, to therefore evolution between molecular genomic revolution to where we are today, gene editing, gene therapy, you name it. And digital revolution, and of course you can imagine where we are today. It's a little bit over 10 years we had an iPhone, but who doesn't have an iPhone? Of course, computation, artificial intelligence. So when you look at where we are today, it's really mind-boggling. I would say that where we are today, this is only a partial list of the kind of things that are now available or can be available to every one of our patients. On the right, of course, are the biomedical breakthroughs, which are genetic engineering, regenerative medicine, immunotherapy, synthetic biology, precision medicine, you name it. And on the right are technological advances, which include, of course, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, robotics, quantum computing, nanotechnology, data, and AI. I mean, you know this well, because you've been talking about this all morning, and particularly, of course, in data and AI. And I don't need to tell you about the potential of data and AI, but also the risks and the concerns of the usage. Suffice to say that the really important issue is the convergence idea of bringing these things to health and medicine. And you've heard some of the great examples today. And I just give you a shout out in Scotland where you are because of what you heard from James and Ken and others, really impressive. And from Heather, really, and the seats, wherever he is, there he is. All the great, amazing stuff that you guys are doing promise tremendous opportunity. And we're going to have that panel discussion later about some of the things you're doing. By the way, I can never say no to Anna. I've known her for, I know Anna, how many years? 30. Yes. And every time she calls, I've got to be here. And I work with her on precision medicine, Scotland, you name it, right? But anyway, I think where I'm saying is the opportunity now is convergence, the bringing together of all the different sciences to solve a problem, a vexing problem. So National Academies and MIT wrote several seminal papers on convergent science. The idea is not just multidisciplinary science, that's we know that exists, but the fact that we're truly bringing disciplines together to solve a problem. And the National Science Foundation in the United States now provides grants for convergent science because it says today's grand challenges can be solved on one discipline alone and converged research driven by a specific problem. And you have these problems we talked about already, whether it's mental health, whether it is cardiovascular disease, but you have to have deep integration across disciplines. So in these early writings, the thinking of bringing together biomedical science, engineering, physical science, mathematics, computation, a tremendous opportunity. I think if it's realized, this convergence, things are going to be extremely different than we are today. We're already seeing some of, I think James was one who said, time is now, the application of some of this technology and science. And I think where we see in the future of science would be a lot more effective prediction and prevention, a real understanding of patterns of biology, disease, and of course it changes altogether how care is delivered, who's delivering the care, and where it can be delivered. A seamless continuum of care, and of course tremendous insight, what we said from data, AI, digital technology that can be assistance to every single individual, healthy or non-healthy, and making clinical decisions. This is really the next brave new world. And if you think about this, Chancellor Zuckerberg says, can we prevent, cure, and manage all disease by the end of the century? Let me see a show of hands. How many believe people say 80 years from now, we have the ability to cure, prevent, or manage all diseases? Now, it's a very broad term. I'm not saying everything's to be cured, but enough of this. Show of hands. Oh, you can do better than this. Think back 80 years ago. Many of you weren't even born, right? Think back when I was born, or think back begin my practice. We had so little to deal with, and today, amazing. 80 years with the pace of technology, I think this broad way of describing cure, prevent, manage is achievable. There lies the issue. Equity. So if you look at where we are today, already we have so much to deal with. I mean, just takes the diabetes drug, semaglutide. You know, I mean, it's so effective, but not everybody has access to it, right? And if you look at this slide, it shows you amazing stuff that we face with our society, the United States, maybe not so much Singapore, I think Scotland as well, right? Which is rising cost of care, worsening access. Carolyn, you may not have a fragmented system, but we do. But your GP specialist, you know, it's got its challenges too. Workforce shortages, we've seen this, I mean, during COVID-19, and even before then with burnout, and we have tremendous shortages in nurses in the United States and also physicians and others. In our country, maternal mortality and morbidity is an embarrassment that we have some of the worst data in developing countries. Deaths of despair, which I think we share, right? Alcoholism, substance use disorder, depression, suicide, you name it, but also declining life expectancy. So you can see in this slide, in the lower left corner is United States. First time, despite what I talk about life expectancy, first time in 2 years we have declined life expectancy. But if you look at the column up there, you see that Scotland also witnessed that during COVID-19. Now, our explanation, our country is not all COVID-19. It is, in fact, the whole issue of worsening health care, worsening health, and a lot more risk in terms of NCDs and others. Oh, by the way, the right-hand side shows you one of the core issues has been set by Chorh Chuan and others. It is social factors that's really determining how we do in health. If you look at the right-hand slide, it shows you income levels and life expectancy. There's no question there's a correlation between those. Now, we saw this innovation, amazing, mRNA vaccine, right? Diagnostics. And Anna, you did a lot over here on this issue. Protect Scotland. But what we found out was the disparity was quite acute between populations. In every vaccine globally, or even our countries and popular in yours, we saw that despite the fact you have these amazing vaccines, not everybody have access to them. And in Protect Scotland, at least this review by O'Donnell says, lots of population actually didn't quite get to it. Particularly marginalized population, and also populations unwilling to, use technology, are those who are really individuals who are more marginalized. My point I'm making is that despite all the excitement about where we will be, unless we can overcome this issue, we can have all the technology you want, but you're not going to end up changing the health trajectory of the population. So while Chancellor Zuckerberg can be right, we may have the technology and science, our question has to be, have we addressed the rest of the social issues? So now you recognize this Michael Marmot's slide on the left-hand side. And of course, what the data from my colleague Mike McInnes demonstrated some years ago, that healthcare is responsible for 10% of health outcomes. The rest are genetic, behavioral, social, and other factors as well. So I think it's very clear to me the future of medicine must look at medicine away from a more traditional way of only doctor-patient, health worker relationship, but also involve prevention, alignment of public health and social needs. And to some extent, I think you've all said this. And I wrote this in Lancet, in the Lancet International lecture I gave a year ago. So I put forward in this paper in Lancet, a separate paper, that we're now moving from bench to bedside to population, which you're doing, but we need to include society as well. Because unless we deal with the social issues, which in fact are social determinants, which in fact also involve many social and other policies, we're not going to be able to realize the tremendous innovation that we see today, and the benefits of this. And in this case, I wrote down, we're going from discovery, translation, research, to adoption and implementation, to, of course, the issue of population and global health. But now we must address the social aspects, because until we do so, as I said, we're not going to have our job done altogether. Now, you can see in the bottom of the slide some cross-cutting areas. I think you've emphasized again and again in today's discussion how important data science is. Convergent science, and I think the third area is equity, diversity, and inclusion. So what's the future of medicine? I think if we're really going to leverage and capitalize our innovation, scientific achievement, we need to start addressing inequities. And in this case, in improving outcomes, we have health and healthcare equity, social equity, and today's theme, innovation equity. I asked myself, how do we get to where we are today, at least in the United States? I think it's a combination of, our enterprise philosophy, the role of government, the role of market, and of course, altogether, our system and the ecosystem of innovation. So if you look at the United States, I think it's somewhat similar to in Scotland, UK as well. The government, of course, as you heard, funds research innovation, and that's a good thing, right? But what kind of innovation gets to the public? In our country, it's called market-driven innovation. That is, that if you have a market, you can make it happen. If there's no market, it's likely that some really good innovation of social good may never reach, in fact, the light of day. So the issue is, we had this science advisor to President Truman. First of all was Roosevelt, then Truman. His name is Vannevar Bush. And he wrote this very famous treatise called Science, the Endless Frontier, 75 years ago, in which he said the government should support great research and the market should commercialize and drive this. And of course, in our country, we're the most innovative country. I think in the United States, we're terrific, but we are very much driven by the market issue. So in terms of government policy, our policies are looking at fairness, opportunities by developers and investigators and investors. And when we prioritize ethical concerns, it's always safety of the patient and autonomy, but over equity. And of course, frequently, as actually Mariana Mazzucato wrote, economist, of course, from here, from UK, that government does not put any condition in supporting research, right? And so the benefit, in my opinion, are the public, but through the mechanisms of market-driven economy. So when you think about in our country, almost all the amazing, and your country too, innovation that comes from academia, right? And then, of course, you look at, and listen about technology, the majority of this new breakthroughs comes academia, they take by industry. So I think it's really important to understand the relationship between government research and industry. And I do think that relationship also be shifting towards what's a better way to have the right balance. And finally, in our country, as you know, we have the highest cost of care. And the drugs prices are amazing. And so, we have insurance, we have government insurance and commercial insurance. So while the individual may not see this issue, it's the taxpayer. And eventually, your employers are paying for this. So I think there's an issue I want to talk about today as to how to shift our research and our innovation into a more mission-driven innovation economy. The idea principle of social good and social equity, the importance of enabling government policy to really have more return investment to the public. And also importantly, to reward value creation. So Mariana writes about who are value creators. And a lot of people think, well, they're the banks and others. She calls them value extractors. We're the value creators. So I think we need to relook at our relationship in these areas. So because of this, we've been very, very focused on this issue at the Academy. About 3.5 years ago, I started a committee called Committee of Emerging Science, Technology, Innovation, but focusing on the social good and social implications of emerging technologies, AI, genome editing, synthetic biology, you name it. Subsequently, we actually performed a study, which you see on the left-hand side, where we talk about towards an equitable framework of innovation framework in health and medicine research. And then Keith Yamamoto, Weiler, and I wrote this science editorial about embedding equity throughout innovation. So this is what I want to talk to you about because this meeting is about innovation. So when you look at the innovation ecosystem, shown here in the center, you can see the life cycle from conception, an idea, to in fact trying to execute the idea in research design, in clinical trials, to move all the way to, in this case, intellectual property, technology transfer, and then industry takes it over and develops this. As been written on this report, equity is always an afterthought. What I like to do is put equity as a forethought in every step on the ecosystem. The idea that in a university, researchers should think about equity. And the question about training every single scientist, from basic to clinical scientists, about the importance of equity. In designing your research and asking a question about, is it addressing equity? In designing the clinical trials, talk about diversity of population, right, and representation. In technology transfer, actually, during this study, we consulted many individuals, including tech transfer officers from Stanford and others. They say, have you ever considered when you now have this amazing technology, have you ever considered equity in the tech transfer? The answer is no. We try to find the best deal possible. But certainly in our country, I know that we practice this when I was at Duke and now at Academy. When we look at vendors, we say, okay, what kind of vendors, what kind of policy do you have in your human resource? Is this a minority-owned business? Is there equity in this? We can do the same in thinking through this. And then, of course, then working with the industry side, we can think about how to actually achieve the equity issue. So I think as we think about innovation, we need to have a new social contract. The question that we should about innovation, of course we believe in discovery science. You know, as you said, curiosity-driven science. We put no strings attached to those, except I think as scientists, when they do such work, can think about the issue of equity, including the laboratory work or who works with that individual. But also the question that we should be asking in our research is it addressing a social need, a medical need? And would it improve outcomes? And of course, is it relevant to the broader diverse population, not just benefit a few? And of course, also we need to understand there are rare conditions where in fact you would want to have designed for that population. So special conditions, special disease, special populations. Accessible, affordable, and distributed fairly, and does not perpetuate disparities in justice, and seeks to correct them when feasible. So I think innovation, as we talk about today, should be guided by ethical principles, including justice, fairness, and the collective good. Okay, I think it's my second last slide. So we are talking about driving towards a mission-driven, equity-based innovation, where we need to relook at the regulatory policy and cultural measures to look at problem-oriented and not profit-oriented, to economically require rethinking for public value, and of course, driven by a comprehensive vision of thematic cross-sectoral research programs. My summary. I think that science, health, and workforce have changed, and you can see the phenomenal innovation in 21st century. But all aspects of this innovation in terms of impacting human, particularly in terms of research ecosystem, should look at the issues of new partnerships, convergent science, prevention, and not only disease, social needs and population, and of course, looking for regulatory and policy needs that address the issue of disparities. Equity must be the heart of all that we do, particularly in the innovation ecosystem. Thank you very much.